Probably. There we go. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining our workshop, organizing, leading a Firewise community. I'm Kristen Cook with You Bet Firewise, and I typically go by KC. This evening, we're taking a little bit of a different approach, and that is because we've all struggled with what's the right way to structure and lead a Firewise community and realize that there's no one answer. So I'm kind of taking a little bit more of an organizational design approach to this. So feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions if something does not make sense to you or does not resonate. So I'm going to go ahead and lead us through the content. And like I said, there's quite a bit in here, but you guys can ask questions and we'll have time to do some workshops at the end. So why does it matter that we're talking about how to structure and lead a Firewise community? And I think the thing for me is that a lot of this tonight is informed by my experience. I've been leading the You Bet Firewise community for about 7 years. And as I texted to Joanne, I said, I wish I had a me back when I started. I didn't know much. I struggled and I'm still struggling, but actually pulling this together to share with all of you guys has really helped me a lot and given me some clarity around how I want to shape the future of You Bet Firewise. So the goal here is to figure out what works to drive action on the ground, but also for a lot of us, myself included, something that lasts beyond us. So when we're ready to take a step back, that the Firewise community still moves forward if we're there or not. So the roadmap that we're going to follow this evening is, in essence, kind of a journey of understanding and providing information to help you look at your Firewise community and say, where are we today? I'm going to spend some time on where are we trying to go, right? So if we don't have a direction, it's hard to figure out, how we should organize to get there. And then based on that, what are the options for organization and structure? And then I'm going to spend some time on why do we get stuck? I hear this all the time. I've been not only leading my Firewise community, but I've been on the steering committee for the Firewise Coalition and now support the Wildfire Ready Coalition for the last 6 years too. So I get exposure to a lot of different communities of all types, sizes. And, I've heard a lot of the same themes, but also some specific things for different kinds of communities. And then, a little bit of a roadmap for what should happen next and some opportunities for you to take some information home and see how it feels. So those are the 5 modules. And the kickoff here is that every Firewise community is different. So this is going to be kind of a general overview of all 5 of these different modules. Each one could be a deep dive in and of itself. But we can't map out every single type of Firewise community. So what I'm going to be doing is hitting on some of the most common. The one thing is too, we have Firewise communities who are just forming and becoming Firewise and not sure what to do. And then we have a lot of Firewise communities like mine that are mature, but still struggle. So all of the information that I'm sharing here this evening really, fits with wherever you are. But the reality is we all started small. We all started with just a spark, an idea, and 1 or 2 people. When I think about the actual stages of a Firewise community, there's 4. The first one is compliance, where you're doing the basics. And I see you're taking a lot of notes, Nancy, and you're welcome to do that. This is recorded and there will be some handouts too. So feel free to take notes if you guys want, but we're here to share with you and help you guys figure out, your structure too. So compliance, I'll talk a little bit about the details behind this, but you're just doing the basics. Active means you're starting to get things done. Engaged, starting to get some people on board, building capacity. Resilient means that sort of Firewise and wildfire readiness is embedded in the culture of your community. So this is going to be a slide we're going to spend a minute or 2 on here. I want you guys to think about your community and think about where you are. So the 4 categories I just referenced, compliance, active, engaged, resilient across the top. I look at it kind of like a seedling, getting into a little plant to a tree and then a forest, right? So if you have a few people to a lot of people. But if you think about what's the difference between each of those? When we talk about the primary focus under compliance as being requirements, that's in essence what NFPA requires for Firewise. So you have your 5-year risk assessment, your 3-year action plan. You have to report out every year, and you have to have an annual meeting. And there are some Firewise communities that they just do the requirements, and that's okay. But I think in Nevada County, what we're seeing is almost all of the communities, once they're up and running, at least fall into the active category where you do projects. You might do a green waste, you might, pull together for a road work party. So you've got some projects, you have more people involved than just one person, and you have some form of communication. Once you go to kind of engaged, you move from projects to programs, and we'll talk about the difference there in a few minutes. And you start to get more consistency and longer range kind of planning. And then again, resiliency, where it's fully embedded and integrated into the community. So when you think about the different things, just no right or wrong answer. I'm going to ask Beth to go ahead and launch a poll. And while you're launching that, Beth, what you guys are going to do simply is check which of these 4 categories you think that you guys are in right now.
It looks like the poll is up. Can you see it, Casey?
I can see it.
Okay.
Okay. Looks like 7 of you responded, and 3 are in compliance, 2 are inactive, 1 is engaged, and 1 thinks they're resilient. I want to know who that is. That's awesome. So that's interesting. So this will be really helpful, I think. And this is what I was saying earlier, that we are all in different stages. So I don't know how I got control of that, but I just clicked sharing. All right, so now that we kind of set a baseline for that, let's go to the next slide. So when I lay all that stuff out there, one of the key messages for this evening is you don't have to do everything. And especially if you're just starting out as a new Firewise community, you just kind of need to do the next thing. Like I said, 7 years ago, I just 1 foot at a time. And Dario is on the call tonight, and he was instrumental in helping me in my first 6 months of being Firewise learn about Good Fire. It seemed like the right next thing to do. It was very brave. So when I mentioned earlier that we wanted to figure out where we're trying to go, and if we don't know where we're headed, we could just end up anywhere. So like I said, I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on some general planning. I don't know everybody's background, but everyone understands that, if you have a goal, it points you in a direction, it's your destination. Strategy is how are you going to get there? Programs become sort of the system that's ongoing, and projects are actions and drive to results. So we'll circle back to this, but just as a kind of a background, when we think about the Firewise community, we have a lot of information provided to us and or that we help develop in our risk assessments and in our 3-year action plans. So a lot of that information that each of us has been working on sets up exactly this. The one thing, though, that I will say that I see a lot of times with Firewise communities is we do a lot of activities, but I'm not sure that we're all thinking about, are those activities getting us closer to the goals that we have? So for an example goal, we could do a whole deep dive on goal setting, which would be quite a workshop. But I did want to just pull forward some examples to make it real for us. So if one of our goals is to build community resilience, we may think that community communications, vegetation mitigation, resident preparedness become really important initiatives. So if we did, and we said, okay, underneath of those, we need to have programs and projects, that's a good goal. And we could come back and look at our activities and say, are they helping us achieve community resilience? The other thing I just wanted to share, program versus project, is super simple. Programs are something that are ongoing, evergreen. We have to do all the time, like resident readiness. But projects become something that's like time stamped. It's a date, might be an event, like we held the Wildfire Ready Festival May 2nd, and we all worked toward that project, and then it was done and it goes away. But we may have wildfire communications on an ongoing basis. So that's the only difference. And as we talk about structure and leadership, it'll start to make sense where you can have people leading an initiative or in a program, on an annual basis. And then you might be able to pick up a leader for a project that perhaps, like I said, could be a green waste weekend. So if you ever find yourself feeling, for those of you who've been a Firewise community leader for a long time, like you're a hamster in the cage and you're just spinning your wheels and you're wondering if you're making progress, I encourage you to go back to the goals that you have set, and I've shared a little more detail on what that might look like. So I do recommend that you guys spend some time figuring out what you're trying to accomplish and what programs are realistic and achievable inside of your capacity. If you're like me and you're a single leader leading these things, and people come to me all the time with ideas, and I'm like, well, until I have somebody who can move that forward, it's just an idea on paper. So, in terms of how these things work together, this is just a really nice way of kind of connecting the dots and helping us stop feeling like we're the hamster on the cage and start to feel like we have a plan. And, we might have things that are in red because they're not being worked and we know they could be worked, and things in green that we know that we're working on. And that takes a lot of the stress away as a leader when you can see where you are in your plan. So I'm going to shift a little bit because it's not just about let's have goals and strategies. And, for me, life would be easy if it was linear and I could just say, okay, this is what we're going to do. The reality is leading a Firewise community is super messy. And that comes in because we have people, and every single person has a different perspective, different strengths, different interests, and they ebb and flow all the time. Sometimes they're willing to help, sometimes they're not. So, what I've learned in the 7 years is follow that energy. As much as I'd like to just say, here's the goal, here's the program, here's what we're going to do, the reality is you can't. You have to work and get your hands dirty, working with what your neighbors want to do, what they can do, what they're willing to do, and not get upset when they make a commitment but then don't follow through. And that's frankly one of the hardest things. So the other piece is how it works together. And this is where juggling, if I had a graphic here, it would be a circus juggler. We talked about the strategic engine, which is the goals, strategies to accomplish a goal of making your community more wildfire ready. But then you've got to marry that up with the passion engine, which comes from your neighbors. And for me, that's exactly that middle ground is how you decide which programs are going to launch. And I'll make it real for you. For years now, since Dario did a prescribed fire on my property when I started You Bet Firewise 7 years ago, I've wanted to, I promote good fire. We've had workshops, but we've never really been able to create a program around prescribed fire in You Bet. Within the last couple of years, I had a neighbor who expressed an interest, and he's been to the workshops that Joanne has taught. And a week and a half ago, he led his first demo burn in You Bet. And so Prescribed Fire is now, after all these years of wanting it, it's now a program in You Bet because we have someone leading it. And so that's where the people part marries up to whatever that goal might be. And people need purpose. And that the purpose comes from our goal setting. But guess what? It's the passion and their energy and what they care about that actually moves that purpose forward. So it's the two combined that help us fly the plane. I thought this was a great analogy. You can't fly a plane with one wing. And the reality with Firewise communities is that without igniting a fire inside of someone to help in some form or fashion, the strategy is just going to sit on page. It's never going to come to life. All right, I'm going to take a quick pause here before we jump into the structures. Beth, let me know if anybody has a question or a comment thus far and would like to, take yourself off mute or raise your hand. We'll take a quick pause.
Nothing so far.
Okay. Anybody does. I'll just keep going. So the structures and how should we organize? The reality again. Oh, somebody just raised their hand. Sushila. Let's make sure she's off of mute.
Yeah, yeah, I've had people in my community want to know about how to have controlled burns. So is that thing that's in UBET something that can go to other communities, or is it limited to UBET?
No, it's absolutely. So, I'm not going to switch gears here, but both Dario and Joanne are on this meeting. At the end, if we have some time, we'll have them chat about fire. But they both lead prescribed fires and workshops, and the Resource Conservation District, the RCD, does. And there's a new organization. Chris is also on this call called the Nevada County Prescribed Burn Association, which is volunteers helping. So we can get those links for you in the chat, and
Great,
you can start to learn about it. Yeah, no, I was making the example, Sushila, just about how I couldn't promote Good Fire and UBET without a leader, right? So
right,
I'm super happy because it's been years in the making. So yeah, no, thanks.
great job. Thank
Yeah,
you.
great question. So when we go back to organizing your Firewise community, it's constantly a dance, and the dance is that the right structure at the right time, and it may change. A lot of times you have too little, and that's where I am, frankly. I'm in chaos right now. And that's fine because I created it and I'm trying to, get my way out. But also, you could have too much structure. So I have seen some communities that have, become nonprofits, 501(c)s, and based on that, they have to have um, a certain structure to meet the requirements. And honestly, they probably have too many committee meetings, and they're all focused on their meetings and less about getting things done. So I recommend, that we stay as nimble, as flexible as possible, and and do what needs to happen for your community. One of the key drivers of that is the size of your community, and small communities are certainly easier to organize. I think a lot of you guys have heard about our neighboring Banner Mountain, which was huge, a large community, and they are dissolving this year to form smaller communities so that the management falls in the hands of, people who know each other. My community is geographically the largest in California. We're almost 13,000 acres, 700 parcels, and it's super hard to coordinate. And it's unbalanced in a sense. So you'll see some neighborhoods, have really good representation and engagement, and others don't. But collectively, we're working together towards some big goals. So there's no right or wrong. Both can succeed. It's just a matter of, kind of where you are and also the goals we talked about, where you're trying to get to. So we're going to take a little bit of a deep dive on each of those four common models. The seedling, the 1 liter, it can be just for getting NFPA recognition and getting off the ground. It can also be 1 liter always. There's, again, no right or wrong, whatever works for you guys. Steering committee is the next kind of standard approach. And that can be anywhere from, 2 additional people to 5 additional people to we have some, as I mentioned, nonprofits that have like 10 people on their steering committee. Program leaders, as you get more mature and you start to really look at, what it's going to take to become fire adapted and which programs are important to you, you may augment your leadership team, which is your leader and steering committee, with program leaders. And then for a very large distributed community like mine, we have neighborhood leaders. So I have 20 different sections in UBET, and my goal is to have 2 to 3 households representing that section at any given time. I've never succeeded in getting them all filled, but again, ebb and flow. Sometimes I have none in one neighborhood, sometimes I have 4. So it's a matter of just, constantly sort of working toward that. So to sum that component up, obviously 1 liter starts. Steering committee, no one should do it alone. Program leaders, a lot of times I think of those as like subject matter experts, like I was mentioning with our prescribed fire and Angelo, and he's learning about fire. So he's leading that initiative. But you could have somebody leading, defensible space and home visits. You could have somebody leading, water tanks. It could be anything that's important to you. So when we think about the one leader, it's obviously best for new communities. And I'm an anomaly. Like I said, I check every one of these 4 boxes. I actually started off with a steering committee and became a sole leader in UBET for these strengths. Fast, simple. I didn't have to sit around and have conversations and consensus and discuss. All my energy went into implementation. So this is what I'm facing now: burnout, dependency, and limited capacity. I have neighbors that are working with me on a new plan. We're currently in UBET kind of structured 2.0, and we're working on UBET 3.0. So that's going to move us out of this particular category. But again, it's not a bad thing. It's just where we are. So Sheila, did you have another comment? Your hand's still up. Oh, there we go. The other thing that I wanted to call out, though, is we also have seen Firewise communities like Bear River Pines where there's co-leads.
Excuse me,
You know,
Casey. It looks like Nancy has a question.
okay.
So my question is, or my comment is, we don't have a Firewise community, but I think we should. And right. And I'm out on Squirrel Creek, and we're part of the Ponderosa West shaded fuel break, and they've just done a second sweep through. And I do know of some neighbors who are also interested. When I saw your workshop, I signed up because I don't know where to start.
Perfect. Well, hopefully this is starting to help, because where you are right now is here. And then the
Here being
coalition,
where?
I don't know if you can see my screen, one leader.
Yes, right. Okay.
So you're kind of a single voice at this point. The Wildfire Ready Coalition, the nonprofit that I'm supporting, we do other workshops on how to start a Firewise community. It's about the requirements from the National Fire Prevention Association, and Joanne can put those in the chat for you. And that way, separately, you can get connected and signed up for learning how to do that. And this will give you insight to how you might want to start organizing your neighbors, which is kind of your first step. Joanne, I see you have a comment. Oh, go ahead, Nancy.
NFPA is the National Fire Prevention Association.
Yes, and they handle Firewise communities.
Will
And
all of these pop-ups, I don't know what else to call these, will I be able to download them, print them, something for my aging brain so I can refer to them?
yeah, we have a lot of information available on the Wildfire Ready Coalition website, and this is also being recorded, and we'll be posting it out. You've got your email in our system. You'll get an email with the YouTube recording.
Okay.
Joanne, I see your hand up. You want to go ahead, Joanne?
Yeah, Nancy, I put the email in the chat there, and if you reach out to me, we will call you or email you, and we'll help you get started. That's part of what we do.
That's awesome. And that's why I signed up for this.
Cool. Well, like I said, I wished I'd had a me when I started. So hopefully this will help get you off on a really solid footing.
Okay.
Joanne, did you have another comment? Nope, she's gone. So I was just simply saying, and Nancy, this makes sense for you too, is a lot of times with newer Firewise communities, one person isn't sure if they want to do it. They're interested, they know it's needed, and they'll find a neighbor and say, hey, let's co-lead this together. So again, what I'm stressing here is there's no right or wrong. You do need to get a couple of people to help you form. And it's good because you get different strengths and perspectives, and, no one person has to take it all on. I do caution, especially if you're just starting or if you're small, to keep the steering committee nimble. The larger and more people that you get involved in the steering committee itself, the less you'll actually get done. I love program leaders, and this is a place where I'm actually moving in my community, is that, I want to find residents who are passionate about any given topic And the topics that we, create programs around will be based on, people hand raising and say, I want to lead that. Prescribed Fire was the example that I used. The reason for that is because if someone is leading it, there's clear ownership. They also become, deeply immersed in that topic and become a really good expert. And by having multiple program leads versus just having the steering committee in charge of everything, it increases your capacity. You can do more. You frankly can get more done. Again, neighborhood leaders, and when you think of a big map like you bet, a big territory divided up into multiple sections and neighborhood leaders in different sections. You can do this in like suburban communities where they have a lot of households, condensed into small areas. That makes a lot of sense, and they typically can call them block captains there. I used to call mine zone leaders until Nevada County came out with Genesis and the evacuation zones. So I had to change the name of what I call my neighborhood leaders. So you can call them whatever you like, but the point is that they take a territory, set number of parcels, and they're responsible for communicating with their immediate neighbors. And frankly, in some communities that are super big or distributed, one person can't know everybody, but if you live next door to someone, you do. And so the neighborhood leader program, even on a medium-sized community, is very impactful. And I know that in Alta Sierra, they have pods, they call them. And so you may have a pod leader and they'll do pod lucks, which is kind of fun, like a potluck, as a way to get everybody together. So there's a lot of room for creativity in this, but just recognizing that there's quite a variety of structures. So the primary advantage, as I mentioned, for one leader is speed, steering committee shared work. Program leaders gives ownership, and neighborhood leaders reach. I did not put projects or volunteers on here, but that is definitely something to think about as well. So I will say that while I have a set of neighborhood leaders in UBET, I also know who are my go-tos for getting work done on the ground. And that's a whole nother, pool of people. So you're talking here, how do you organize and lead? So you're kind of talking about sort of the upper level, if you will, in terms of management. But to show you guys, how that looks in sort of a traditional way, and not all of these fit for everybody, but just a super simple, inside of your steering committee, one person could be designated as the leader. Some people, do it for a time period like a year or 2 years. Some people just do it until they get tired and then somebody else takes over. And again, all of these things are just ways to organize and, depending on the size, the time, the maturity of your community, a different combination might work. So this is one of my favorite analogies. So I'm telling you a story. This goes back probably 15, 20 years. I was in New Orleans. And one of a life lesson for me is on Frenchman Street, which is off of Bourbon Street, there's all these jazz clubs, and it's where all the local musicians go on their nights off. And this one club had this massive stage, and all these musicians were coming in, with their violins, their saxophones, and the band leader basically he would announce the song that was coming up and what kind of music it was going to be, and he'd scream, "Get in where you fit in." So all of a sudden you might have, a banjo up on stage because that was going with that song. And I loved that idea, and I use it in my Firewise community all the time. It doesn't matter if we're doing a work party and you can't wield a chainsaw. If you can bring waters and help, keep those folks doing the labor happy, get in where you fit in. I've had neighbors drop cases of water off on my front door and never show up to the work party. And so for me, it's less about setting, rigid expectations and more about being fluid and trying to create good music together. So as you think about, kind of the phases, obviously building the team is number one. And for those of you who have been around a long time, I will be saying, let's reevaluate the structure if you're stuck. And we're going to talk about that. The second is building momentum. And so from a leadership perspective, I think that middle pillar here is one of the most important things that a leader can do is to be like a cheerleader, not just a strategic leader, but a cheerleader for Firewise, and making sure that things are visible and you're constantly giving feedback and attaboys, attagirls, and appreciation and shout outs and all kinds of things when people help out. And then the long term, building culture is a advanced level, a little bit more sophisticated. But you could do friendly challenges, even if you have 10 houses on one road and 10 on another, and you say, okay, this month we're going to do Scotch broom pulling, and let's see who can beat each other. And, the winning road will we'll get a pizza party or something. So the idea is really, turning all of these things into just sort of how we live. So I want to chat briefly about bottlenecks, because this is what I hear all the time, is that we're stymied, we don't know where to go, we have no engagement. The same 10 people do all the work. And the idea, honestly, launching, Nancy, once launching, is there's steps to it, and Joanne and the coalition will help you with those. But getting started and becoming recognized Firewise isn't the journey. It's the starting gate. It's literally just how you start. So as you start to get up and running and mature, and for those who are on tonight who have been doing this for a long time, we talked tonight mostly about organizing, structure, and leadership. Communication, doing a workshop on communication this same time next week for the coalition as well. But I think the biggest struggles we have are participation and succession. And so, I go back to this: if we're organized properly and we lead in a way that gets people excited, I think we'll gain more participation and potentially, start to have more people willing to step in and take on leadership roles. So the other piece that I will say is, for whatever reason, this is kind of what happens. And I know that Joanne and Dario, and probably closer to a lot of the communities in Nevada County than I am, but it feels to me like a lot of the longer term communities have plateaued. And so, when I think about how we're organized, and I've plateaued, but it's on my shoulders. So I'm working toward, like I said, moving off of a one leader model to a council or steering committee model with program leaders. And that makes sense for UBET because we're large, but then, it all has to work together. So when you think about, what your stages are, like we mentioned before, how you organize yourselves might be different at each stage. So if you're plateaued and you've been active, but you haven't got to engage, maybe it's how you're leading the community that needs to change. Not that people aren't willing to be engaged, but perhaps, you haven't made opportunities clear enough for them. And I've got my hand raised here because I suck at delegating. And it's not easy for me to create ways for people to get engaged. But the minute I ask any of 100 neighbors, they're right there to help me. So my challenge is that the bottleneck is capacity. I'm just one person. So I have to reorganize how I'm structuring this in order to build capacity and make sure that we can get more done. So the other thing, this was another analogy I've used forever, and that's me on the bike drifting back, in case you can't see. But this idea of a bicycle team, and I've always been enamored with it because, they're typically in long distance races, and the only way they can go the distance is one person is up here, everybody else is drafting and saving energy. That person up front is going to tire out, so they just pull over and drift back and get back in line. They don't leave the team, but they simply say, okay, I'm going to just draft for a while. My expertise is here, but I'm just going to let someone else lead. And so I love that idea for Firewise communities of, making it okay for someone to say, life happens. I have things going on in personal life. Somebody's getting married, or, I have to take care of a ailing family member, or I'm going on vacation. And we should be making it okay. What happens in most Firewise communities is whoever's in the lead just stays there. And so this is a concept that I'd love to see us adopt and sort of, make normal, that there's this rotating leadership, and make it okay for people to drift for a while. Or actually it's draft. I said drift, draft. So shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about a few of the things in the 7 years of running UBET and seeing other communities, the themes I was talking about, things that do work. And it boils down to people. We're all volunteers. This is not a paid position. Like I said, I wish it was goal setting, create programs, implement programs, and all that good stuff, but it's not. So we have to build around the people. When I mentioned earlier, as a good leader, make things visible, find some things that could be super visible and build that campfire. Let them see it. Let them come to you. And, a lot of times we're chasing people down and we're hammering on them, and it doesn't feel good for us and it doesn't feel good for them. But if we create an opportunity and they see it and it's visible, then people will start to wonder what it is and ask questions. And once they open up and start talking and you're in a dialogue, good things come of that. The other concept that that I'm sharing is a lot of times we ask people to do something and they don't know who we are. And so they don't know what we've done for the community, and they don't know that we've already deposited so much of our personal time and our effort. And we're asking them to attend an annual meeting or volunteer on a work party, or we're telling them, hey, you haven't done your defensible space, you're threatening me. If we've done all of these deposits, we've created evacuation maps, we got the recognition, we've developed relationships with the fire department, we've done a lot of things. If we make that visible, and then they're going to be much more likely to go, oh my gosh, of course I'm going to help. But if either we haven't made it visible, or all we do is just send out an email, just send an email. I send emails, but it's just one thing that I do. But if that's all I did and just expected people to show up or donate or participate, I'd have insufficient funds in that bank account. So I think it's also important to recognize, who knows the Firewise community, what it's doing, who's running it. And so when there's an ask, they recognize that, oh, wow, this is something I really should do. I should participate. It's my community. I live here. And the last one here, this has been super hard for me because I'm not inherently a patient person. But I think that in UBET, for me, one of the main successes was the one person at a time. When I first started developing an email list, I mean, I'm not kidding. I would jump up and down when I'd see 2 people at it. I'm like, oh my God, I got 2 more people signed up for our email list. And I still, to this day, I got 2 last week and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know who they are. This is exciting. So, celebrate every single person who is curious or asking questions or signs up for anything. The other thing is, I'm pretty driven and I'm going down the path, but people are only going to help when it works for them. And a lot of times there's not flexibility in what I'm doing for the community. And so you have to be okay that life happens and they may not be able to join in. Nurture the relationship. And this is the part where I feel terrible. I love my neighbors. And I mean that sincerely. I spend so little time on the people side of things because I'm so stretched on all the programs that I can't wait to get more folks involved at a leadership level so I can spend more time with my neighbors. It's just super rewarding. And the other thing, as you progress into Firewise, recognize that, like I do defensible space visits. And when someone says to me, what's a red flag day, rather than slap my palm on my forehead and be like, what, you don't know? I ask them what they do know about it. And I talk to them about what they think they should be doing on a red flag day. On any topic, remember that a lot of times it's the first time they've heard it, even if you've obviously messaged it 100 times. And the last piece is that keep your head high, keep showing up, because as the forest and the people all start to come out and you start to see, one person and then 10, it makes it all worthwhile. All right. So I'm going to ask you to go ahead and post up the second poll, Beth.
Coming right up. I can see it, but it's not going to let me launch it. So one sec, let
Okay.
me try again.
No worries. The poll will be, kind of thinking about where you are, where we are today, where we're trying to go.
Okay, it's up.
And based on that, I want you to choose what your current leadership model is, and then be thinking about all the things we've just discussed. We're gonna ask you to think about what it should be. So, real quick, there's a few of you who've checked one leader. Um, if you're willing, those of you who checked it, it doesn't show who did here. I'd love to hear from you if you feel a lot of the same sort of stress that I feel. If you would like to share, that's fine. If not, that's okay too. Sushila.
I checked one leader because maybe I didn't hear the instructions. I would like to increase that, but I just felt like I got started and we have about 100 parcels. So right now we're just kind of growing. I have about 20 people enlisted, 20 parcels. So it's kind of like until we get more, I like to see who's leading, who could help lead, and I figure by the
Yeah.
end of the year we should have more. We should have more.
Yeah, I like that. And sounds like you're forming, you're relatively new. What I would suggest is right out of the gates, pick a model from here or anywhere else and make it clear that as you kind of get up and running and more people enlisted, that the expectation will be somebody, you'll have partners in a steering committee of some sort. Otherwise, you're going to be in my trap, which is everyone thinks Casey's got it. We don't have to do it, right? So, make sure that you pull something that makes sense to you and not asking people to do things. Just say, as we get more people involved, we'll need to do this, and these are the roles I'm looking to help fill. That would be great.
Yeah,
Thank,
that's a
thank,
good direction to go to for sure.
thank you.
Thank
Dario,
you.
thank you. Dario, you have your hand up.
Yes, I'm the leader of the Lower Colfax Firewise Community. We've been around for 10 years, if anyone doesn't know. I started out for years being the sole leader, and it was difficult. But we got a lot of work done, and people wanted to help in other ways. So now I've got a really good co-leader. It takes a lot of work off my hands. And then we have neighborhood leaders that are filling in the gaps in the neighborhood. So it takes time, but just keep asking people to help and ask them in specific ways. Like, could you help with communications? Are you good at writing little newsletters and whatever they're good at? Try to rope them in and give them an assignment, and eventually they'll help a lot.
Yeah, Dario, thank you. It sounds like you're in a lot of the same position I am, and I call that a hybrid model. Um, I don't have a co-leader, but I have probably a handful of people that are my go-tos. So they're informally a steering committee. We're moving toward a steering committee or a council format. And yeah, I have so many neighborhood leaders that are amazing. So it's just I feel like, the size we are, we need more. Joanne, jump on in.
Yeah, my connection may not be very good, but I'll try. I have a hybrid model. So sometimes I'm the single leader, but I also have a steering committee that I can draw upon, and they're also the neighborhood leaders. So we're small, and we also have a culture, and there's no one right answer. Some Firewise communities that's equal across it, like does all they have kind of.
Joanne, we've lost you. Joanne, I think we're going to just go ahead and ask you to mute. You broke up and then we lost you. Anyone else have any comments around how you're currently structured and thoughts around your future? Okay. Food for thought. So now I'm going to move us forward to, the reality is that the minute you start thinking about these categories that we've been talking about, leadership structure is really the focus, but participation, communication, succession. If you have a couple of core people that you can work with, it's not just where are we, but where do we want to be? And, we typically, I think, spend a lot of time talking about that neighbor who is or isn't defensible space, or what do we do with this absentee owner property? It's overgrown, or that person's fence is, touching my tree, and all the kinds of things that make sense from a fire perspective. But we don't spend a lot of time thinking about where are we? What's the health of our Firewise community? And what dial should we be looking at to improve and putting effort against that?
Casey,
So when
Joanne added on to what she was saying earlier that her Firewise community is a hybrid of both leadership and stages, although I don't know if stages is a typo. I think she meant structure.
Yeah, a hybrid. And I think that's more common than not, right? So I think that's for me, it's about thinking of these things as cherry picking what feels good. And then as your Firewise community changes, matures, you need to evaluate that and not get stuck and plateaued. But recognize that just because it's set up one way doesn't mean you can't change that and shouldn't change it. So, just keep it simple, organize, take visible action, work really hard to embed wildfire readiness into the culture of the community. That'll be part of what we talk about next week at the communications workshop. And then for me, I just cannot emphasize enough this notion of focus on each person, celebrate a conversation, a new introduction, find your leaders. We'll talk about that next week too. I'm calling it Find Your One. And, really let some of the neighbors carry that heavy lift in terms of getting other people engaged. But the participation at the leadership, if you make it visible and contagious and they see that actual impact in the community, people will want to be involved. So that's the conversation that I was hoping to have with everybody, and leaving plenty of time to literally open up for any kind of topic conversation related to this or anything else.
Casey,
Go ahead
there's
and
a few things in the chat. Joanne continued about the other models similar to her Firewise or Deer Creek South Side. They have a committee, and each person has a role that they co-lead. One handles communication, one handles administration, and one projects. And then we also have a comment from Melissa that she's just getting started with 2 people.
Yeah. Melissa, if you want to take yourself off mute and share with us what's going on, we'd be happy to hear.
Okay, great. I can do that. I don't know some of this other stuff like team chat. I don't know where all these things are, but we're just if I feel like we're just we're a little bit stuck. People don't really respond. I think I'm gonna end up like making phone calls and really trying to actually talk to people because the email situation isn't has not been working. I don't get really any responses. But I've tried to provide information. So I think the next thing is what really needs to happen is to figure out how to get grant money, because we've got a couple properties that are just really need some help, and there's no way this one woman is going to be able to do it.
Yeah, so there's a lot in that. Next week, I'll be doing a deep dive on communication and engagement and sharing, all kinds of tips for that. But when you're structuring, right, and like Joanne just said in her chat, sometimes with your team, even if you only have a couple of people, if you've got somebody who's really outgoing and gregarious and loves to talk to people, they might be your neighborhood ambassador. And like I said, there's a variety of ways to go about it, and we'll go into a deep dive next Tuesday. But I think that, starting with you guys, what are you trying to accomplish holistically as a community? And then how do you each play to your strengths? So I think this conversation is around, do you have the right people at the table to move it forward? Or is there something that you're missing and specifically you should be recruiting for as another leader?
Mm-hmm. I look forward to next week.
Awesome.
Okay. Casey, Joanne is asking to bring up the barbecue toolkit, social events, food with soft education.
Yep. That's all part of communication engagement next week, but we do have tools available to help help with that engagement. And that is part of the whole thing, right? So once you know what you're doing, what kind of you're trying to accomplish, and you have your organization, your leadership team in place, you then need to do outreach to the rest of the community and share share everything, right? So it's not just how you communicate, but it's also creative ways to communicate. And so like I said, we'll do a deep dive on that next week. But we do have a barbecue toolkit, which is especially tailored to like Nancy and Melissa, who are newer leaders. Everyone knows how to have a party or a potluck, but we've got a toolkit that's Firewise specific so that you can download that, and it's got talk tracks for how to talk to people and help, sort of make it both social, but weave in some fire safety tips as well. Any other comments or questions?
Yes, Sheila has a question, and I also have that same question. The PDF that I've uploaded, do you want that returned?
No. Oh my gosh, thank you. No. That's just a quick, that was me experimenting with a document, trying to put a tool in everybody's hands that, might help you think through some of the challenges and so forth. So that's just for you. There's no requirement, it's no grading, there's no sharing unless you feel want to and get help with it.
One more thing Joanne mentioned on the Firewise page on our website, there's a best practices area that has a lot of answers to these questions.
On the so that's I've just pulled it up here. The website she's talking about is the nonprofit, the Wildfire Ready Coalition of Nevada County, and the address is wildfirereadync.org. There's also a YouTube channel for the Wildfire Ready Coalition where this and all of the workshops that are recorded on Zoom get placed, as well as our quarterly meetings. Highly recommend taking a look at those topics. And then if you're on Facebook, we just launched a few weeks ago a brand new Facebook group just specifically for Nevada County Firewise members and residents who are interested in learning more. And the idea is really like you could go in there and ask any question you have. And you've got we just launched and we've got something like 50 or 60 members already who could crowdsource your answer. So you're not alone. So the coalition is here for you, and then the community is here for you as well. I think that's it. If we
Do you
have,
want to do poll number 3, Casey, or were you waiting for
yeah,
questions?
let's do poll
Okay.
number 3. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Untitled question number 2. That means you can say anything you want. This is an open-ended question. If you have things that you feel would be a good topic for future workshops, please just jot them down. No right or wrong answer. Things you're wondering about, things you'd like to learn about, things you need help with.
That second question, which that's an error, my mistake, I apologize. The question was, what topics would you like to discuss in future workshops? You can also email that if it's something that you think of later. And our email contact is on our website.
Yeah, that is the question that showed up. All right. Well, I'm going to end that poll.
Wow. Do we want to know what the real question was? List one idea from this workshop that you would apply to your Firewise community.
There you
if
go.
you have one.
I think we could probably like it's a mystery. It's a mystery question. Can you see the answers, Beth?
Yes, I think. Let's see. The first question, what topics would you like to discuss? Joanne Drummond said the work party organization and traffic control. Another guest said creative ideas of how to communicate, engage with neighbors regarding defensible space and home hardening, navigating difficult neighbors, people who don't think that they're at risk. A third comment is, how do you structure and recruit leadership? What are different models? Hierarchical, roundtable shared by expertise, or skill and interest? And then someone else said ideas for neighborhood Firewise projects. And to the other question, which was one idea that you would apply to this workshop. One person said that they liked them all. Someone else said, great workshop, glad I attended. I think we need to help push our help with NFPA certification, not to mention memberships. And that was from Joanne Drummond. Recycle Queen is saying, where do I get handouts? Is there a contact list specifically? So our email address for Firewise Communities is in the chat, and I will also send it to the email that you used if you registered for this workshop. And I can also just tell you what it is right now. It's fwcc@wildfirereadync.org.
Awesome. So thank you so much for everyone who jumped on. And if you have feedback, you can always reach me, Casey, at youbetfirewise@gmail.com. Happy to answer any additional questions. I know this was probably a little bit thought-provoking. Like I said at the beginning, it certainly was for me. And, I'm like a train running down the track. This helped me step back and evaluate where my community is and drive some clarity for what I need to do next. So I hope that it did the same for you. And I'll look forward to seeing you guys next Tuesday when we do communications and outreach. All right, this concludes our workshop. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.